they're continuing their soul's journey. And once you're able to really sense that, it gives people a lot of peace that are grieving. It gives people closure. It gives people hope.
Learn the ways of the goddess and accomplish much more with so much less effort. Welcome to Your Goddess Awakened with Hallie Evelyn, a show dedicated to helping you embrace your divine feminine and nurture your inner goddess for a radiant life. We invite you to join us every week to receive goddess wisdom that will help you through your current obstacles and lifelong traumas. Awaken the goddess within you and transform your business and your life, only here on Your Goddess Awakened.
So hello, I am so excited to welcome my dear friend and client and just powerhouse, Michelle Barr. I first came across Michelle in some of my coaching circles a few years ago, but I've had the chance to spend some time with her and get to know her. And she is an incredible and gifted medium. And she's also a coach and a speaker and a teacher. And I'm so excited to get to talk to her today about her work and about how she has brought the sacred divine feminine into her practice for amazing results. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk with you and your community today.
So tell us about, I feel like I want to hear this story myself because I haven't really heard the full thing, but tell us about what your experience was like when you first started acting as a medium, and is that different from being a channel, and talk about that experience for you.
My journey really started, I was aware always that I was an empath once I understood what an empath was. Growing up as an empath, you just think everybody processes that way. And then you find out that you are very different than a lot of people. And I came into that understanding that I had healing gifts. So first I took a really traditional route and I became a therapist, and I was working in hospice and hospitals and in crisis and trauma a lot. And I started realizing there was a lot of alternative healing out there that could really help. And I became more and more aware of my gifts and being sensitive to energy. And part of it was because I didn't know how to manage it, and I got really sick, and that led me on this healing journey. And I came into my spiritual business work as a healer. And it's so funny with the mediumship because it is a very strong gift for me, but somehow I had a block that, yes, I'm a healer. And then I finally said, yes, I'm a psychic. And I really said no to the mediumship for a lot of years until it finally called and I was ready to fully develop it professionally. And it's a very personal spiritual journey that unfolds as I did that. And so you ask about, there's healing, there's psychic work, there's mediumship, and channeling. I found I'm a natural channel as well, both automatic writing and speaking. And even when I was a therapist, I would channel and not know where it came from, but be aware I was saying things that weren't coming through my mind. And channeling can happen in healing, in psychic work, and in mediumship. And it can also be a very intentional, where you're going to serve as a channel and open up and bring forward messages from non-physical spiritual world.
So I think that the work that you do is really fascinating. In fact, once I met you in person and got to know you, I actually gave you a special nickname. I started calling you the modern Edgar Cayce. I'd love to talk for just a minute about how mediumship has evolved since the days of Cayce. You know, he was like almost a carnival sideshow, even though a lot of people took him seriously. Like the fame part was almost like, you know, notoriety, as opposed to people actually believing that he did what he did. So talk about that for a minute.
there's been a lot of evolution in mediumship, and it continues to grow and evolve in really interesting ways, because in the early times when mediumship evolved and spiritualism, which is a form of spiritual belief around mediumship, there was a real need to prove life after death. And people didn't have a lot of access to that. And now we have so much access, the internet, we have TV shows, you can find mediums everywhere. And so now mediumship has taken a turn to really grow into still proving life after death, but also healing. And it's being called now to bring forth greater messages and more information. Now people want to know, okay, if there is life after death, what is it like over there on the other side?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we're going to talk a lot today about the sacred divine feminine. I want to just mention that the lack of it in our society has actually created space for us to forget the whole cycle of life. So we've been invited by the society around us for thousands of years to forget about the concept of death being followed by rebirth, and that rebirth being a natural part of evolution and a natural part of the cycle. And we can see it everywhere in nature, but the idea of not having the feminine in that cycle pulls out the idea of birth followed by death, followed by rebirth. And in taking that kind of sacred piece out, we have limited ourselves severely and created a lot of fear around the idea of death. Now, I was just visiting with a friend last night who is dying, a young woman who's dying of stomach cancer. And now it's, everywhere. And I mean, she really just does have a few days left. And she's releasing her body with so much grace and so much way showing for the rest of us of how it can be done, even though she's in pain and even though she's physically suffering. There's this deep understanding that she has that she is not like she's letting go of her body, but that she is still going to exist. And it's really powerful to see something like that. So how has your work changed people's lives from seeing that there's something beyond?
I love that you talk about that, because there was a time I was a hospital chaplain and I worked in hospice, and I worked with death and dying also as a therapist with grief and bereavement. And there is so much taboo still and fear around death and dying, especially in a lot of these cultures that you find in the United States, especially. And what I found is once you realize that you can have connection with your loved ones on the other side, it's what I was saying before. Then people want to know, well, what are they doing over there? And what is it like over there? And they continue on as they are, and their soul continues to evolve. They're doing things over there. They're available over there to us, and they're continuing their soul's journey. And once you're able to really sense that, it gives people a lot of peace that are grieving. It gives people closure. It gives people hope and new ways to think about, like you said, that whole cycle of the naturalness of birth and death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because on my way over there to dinner last night, I said to my girlfriend, let's do our best to see this as a celebration, not even just a celebration of her life, but a celebration that she's going on to her next adventure. She's always loved to travel. And what is this but, the greatest traveling that we get to do? And I'm reading a lot right now about near-death experiences and about what people have been bringing back from that time of that NDE. And what I'm learning is that there's so much consistency and so many patterns that we can really tell the story and start to see the story of what happens after people cross over.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that up, because in near-death experiences, people from all over that had had them across the years, they come back and they say so much the same. It's exactly what you said. There is so much consistency, and the same with all different mediums all over the world bringing messages by connecting with the other side. There are things that are very common experiences from everybody in that. So looking at people who've had near-death experiences is fascinating. And a lot of times when they come back, that actually amps up their own gifts. And a lot of them come into their mediumship and their psychic and healing gifts from that.
That makes perfect sense. I find that when I work with people who are channels, my own abilities as a coach and as a healer amplify. And I'll suddenly find myself that, like, during that session, I downloaded a new way to work with clients, like, forever. And so it's really powerful when that happens. And I've been very lucky to get to start people sometimes, like a half a dozen people, I've started them channeling. And it's fascinating to see when that happens, especially when they're, like, reluctant, and then the channel just like shows up and comes in. That's really fun. But it's a really fascinating thing to get to do. Talk a little bit about your own experiences with either being a medium or channeling. I would love for people to understand, like, what your pathway into it is, and then, like, how you get into it every time these days.
It first would happen spontaneously. I'd be aware of it. And then I was able to go back and see where, as a child, I had experiences. I just didn't know what to call them. That wasn't something that was in my family, and it wasn't something around me. Once I got into my own spiritual awakening and the metaphysical and the healing and the psychic, it was much more a natural progression. But again, even when it's happening spontaneously, at some point you choose to focus on it and to develop it. People always say, well, if it's a natural gift, why do you need to train or develop it? It's like anything else. To learn how to use it, they are in another dimension, and you have to change your vibration to perceive them and communicate. And again, people don't always understand how it works. And it really, I say a lot of times, it's like playing charades. It is not like you're picking up a phone and having a clear phone call. You're perceiving energy, and there's a lot that goes into that. You have to have your own body. You're, as the channel and the conduit, your body has to be right for it, your energy and vibration. And then there are things you can learn to help that along. And in channeling too, it's a surrender. In both mediumship and channeling, you have to surrender your conscious mind to let it come through. And my biggest challenge has been getting my conscious mind out of the way so that I can do the mediumship. Your conscious mind will want to jump in and save you or help you.
Yes. And that actually is a good segue into the sacred, divine, masculine, and feminine part of this conversation, because your conscious mind here is really the masculine. It's like, here, let me do it for you. You're not able to, I want to say, like, you're a girl, like, let me lift the heavy things, or let me, like, go through the process for you. But I don't mean it in the sense of being a woman or being a man. We all have the masculine and the feminine inside of each of us. And what I've found for myself and for many, many of my clients is it tends to be out of balance. Like, it has to be a conscious thing to bring that back into balance. So when you talk about your brain, saying like it wants to help you or it wants to save you, that's actually the masculine side of you. And I feel like the feminine, which is the creative and the allowing, the receiving parts of you, that's the part that maybe is the channel. What do you think about that?
Very much. I like how you said it. It's true. I'll start getting information and it's a receiving. You're blending and you're receiving. And then my mind wants to jump in and solve a puzzle or solve the problem or tell me this is crazy. You can't do this. People are going to think whatever and stop doing it. And it wants to save and rescue, like you said. Here, let me come in and help. And it actually will stop you in your tracks. And it is the feminine. The channel is that real feminine of you have to completely surrender your energy to receive and to perceive what's out there. And the more in channeling, I found I have to get my mind, my conscious mind, even more out of the way. How I picture it is my conscious mind has to come over here and sit in a chair and just be totally out of the way. It's still there. And with mediumship as well, it's that balancing of the masculine and the feminine, because when I'm training mediums, one thing I see is the masculine wants to come in, teach me how to do it, and I'll do it. Okay, now I'm going to do it. And all that does is blocks them. And I say, surrender, open up, fall back into spirit, and they don't want to let go. And in channeling, it's that piece too, where you don't want to let go and allow your voice to be used by spirit.
You know, it's funny because as women, we know that there is that legacy of it not being safe to let go. It's not safe to be in your power. It's not safe to stand in your own sovereign power and be who you are fully, because for thousands of years, you could be killed. As I like to say often, you can be killed for having red hair. You know, it's like, that's how crazy it was. So what you're talking about is so important, because I believe that it's coming from that place inside of you where, you know, death could happen here if I'm not careful. It isn't safe to act like this. And then we make the choice not to, right? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, you feel it. You feel like there's stigma around it. You feel like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm not safe? What if somebody thinks I'm scamming or I shouldn't be doing this? A lot of times I was talking to some of my students last night who were giving these amazing readings that people could validate, but in the middle of it, their brain started saying, what if I'm making this whole thing up? What are they going to think? And then if you're being paid, it's that added, like you said, people used to have a fear of being killed, and now it's that they're going to come for you. They're going to come after you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And it, you know, we're at such a powerful time in evolutionary history of this planet where women for the first time are having rights that we have never had before. You know, I always go back to the idea that in my lifetime that women couldn't own their own bank accounts or have their own credit cards. And, you know, by the time I was old enough, you know, it was legal, but it was still just fascinating to me when I found that out. I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what? Like, let's back up here, because how impossible that concept was to me. But it really speaks to how women were so often limited for so long by I call it the patriarchy, but really by the men kind of like owning them, right? The men owning them and the men owning everything. So I love what you're saying. It's so powerful, because we do tend to second guess ourselves as people, right? Just as people. But I feel like, you know, if you believe in past lives, it's like every man or woman has had past lives as a woman. And so we've all been, I don't know, burned at the stake or tortured or ostracized or exiled for our beliefs. Do you ever channel people or do you have mediumship experiences where those stories come up?
Very much. They usually show up as blocks in people when they're developing their mediumship. It is very strong in the collective consciousness, those persecution memories. and people have issues with their throat, or even I've heard interesting, and I've come across this so many times, people who can't wear necklaces that are chokers. They can't have things around their neck. People who have feelings of being burned at the stake. And so when they get up in front of a crowd and they're in their power, whether as a healer, a psychic, a medium, a channel, something kicks in and I see them regress or come out of it. There's so much fear around being visible and being in your power. And they've learned that. And if you go back, there are a lot of memories around that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that in the coaching circles, it's often called the witch wound. And that's really where it comes from, is the idea that you were burned at the stake as a witch. And lots and lots and lots of people were. And then, of course, we get into like the idea, and I've talked about this in other episodes, with the idea of heresy and the idea of what that means, and being burned at the stake for your beliefs, which were simply outside of the beliefs of the norm. And that was true for a lot of women, and then also for men as well, because of course men were burned at the stake for being heretics all the time. So yeah, that's really interesting. So you don't only teach mediumship and act as a medium, you have something really powerful coming up where you're going to be able to teach in a bigger way. So please talk about that.
I'm very excited about my institute. I started with a local healing business 13 years ago in my community, and then I took my business online. I've been in the coaching world and the healing and intuitive arts world for over a decade online, and I really got called to put a physical headquarters and institute on the ground. In the 4 years that I took 4 years and I traveled extensively in the United States and outside of the United States, training and developing as a medium. And I go to places like Lilydale and Arthur Findlay College in England. That was on my bucket list for years. And I was inspired by Spirit to create a training center where people would come as a destination location from all over the world. And I've connected with so many great mediums all over the world that I can bring to my area. So this year, I am putting my institute on the ground here in Texas, in Dallas, and I'll be offering teaching and training in mediumship and all the healing and intuitive arts, and bringing people from all over. So it'll have an online component, but there's something very powerful about taking the time and going away and training and studying in person in a community with a powerful mentor.
And you are a powerful mentor. Absolutely. So those of us who are Harry Potter fans, I feel like, we'll have the US version of Hogwarts after all. So that'll be awesome. You could see
I love that. Yes.
My owl up here. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. So there's my head wig up there. I love everything that you're talking about. I think it's so important. Why is it important now?
It's really important now. We've just come through as a global epidemic of going through all these changes in the world. And I've known for a long time, healers have been getting wake-up calls. But when we saw something the entire globe is going through at once, that's creating all kinds of change, I saw so many people waking up. You probably saw too in 2020, where other people were saying, oh no, what if your business suffers? My business boomed. All of a sudden people are waking up. I got to get my book written. I've got to be who I am. I have these gifts coming out, because they're being called to the forefront, and more people are waking up. And it's just tons of mediums. Two things: mediums who are good and that people can find are now booked for months and even a year in advance. So there are not enough great trained mediums who are actually available doing this work as their vocation, that are available for all the people that need a medium. And then all the people waking up, they are looking for mentors, teachers, classes, and we're going to continue to change in the world. More and more change is coming. So I see more people waking up, both to having the experiences and needing help, and being the helper, being called to do something.
I love all of that. And you reminded me about something that you said just now, something that you said earlier about people's gifts. And I'm going to try my theory out on you. You tell me what you think, okay? My theory is that we all have psychic abilities. We all have the clairvoyant abilities of some kind, right? Clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance. However, we all act like we want to just show up as, Shakespeare, or show up as Mozart, right? Mozart's writing his first concerto at 3. But it's more like it comes to us slowly over time as we develop the gifts that we have. But everybody has the natural gifts. What do you think about that? Because a lot of people, we use the word gift because it's like, oh, I don't have those gifts. And I remember saying many, many, many years as I was facilitating my ex's channeling, I was like, oh, well, he's, they literally said, I'm the facilitator and he's the vehicle. And I was like, okay, well, that's my job. I'm a facilitator. I cannot be a vehicle. But when I started coaching, it was like, oh, I can be a vehicle too. Not the same way, but that's okay, right? And I had a tendency to say those gifts in me didn't exist when it was really a matter of just that they weren't developed. And I now believe that everyone, we've all got them. It's not like they're gifts, it's like they're extra senses, if you will. So like we all have them. What do you think about that?
That's really the way to talk about it. We have our senses, and then when we're teaching mediumship or learning mediumship, it is your senses at another level. You're perceiving energy. So I know that some people like myself I'm very aware that I'm extra sensitive to energy, and yet everyone has gifts. To some degree, everyone can learn to sense their own loved ones or to feel that presence. We always say that not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychics. So you find some people and they talk about natural mediums and all of that. So the gifts are there. And then some people they're wired and designed more to bring that through, the vehicle for that. And yet it takes training and development. Until I said, I'm going to develop these gifts, they just happened spontaneously. I had no control over them. And then they actually cause very sensitive people a lot of problems, and they end up shutting down because they can't manage their energy at all. So there are people who are born super sensitive, or people who've had near-death experiences. I know mediums who said they didn't have any experience with that, and then they had a near-death experience, and when they came back they had that open up. So it's definitely in everyone to some degree, and then some people are just more called to it as their purpose or what they're able to do.
That's really powerful. So you talked about the idea of people shutting down, and I often teach really, really simple shielding techniques because of the fact that I think that, we can shield. All of us can learn to shield, even those of us that are so empathetic that it's almost painful. I actually just recorded a shielding video yesterday. My favorite way to shield is, I call it the Star Trek method. And it's basically like you just pass your hand in front of your body. And as you bring your hand like from waist height, because I know this is, some people will be listening and not seeing this. You bring your hand like from waist height up in front of you over your head. And as you do, you simply say shields up. And I call it the Star Trek method because it's what you used to see, them do as they were putting their shields up. They would just say it and press the button, and then boom, everybody's shields would be up. But I've shared that with people who are deeply, deeply empathetic, again, to the point of being like, I see it as like antenna, but antenna in a way that when you hit your thumb and then your thumb is just throbbing, 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 and the ends of these empaths' antennas are just throbbing all the time because they're in such pain. And so when you just do that, shields up, it can make a huge difference. So will you share maybe another way of helping people who are afraid of their gifts or who are uncomfortable with them? What do you recommend there?
I like that what you gave, the shields up, because it's true. It's that simple. Energy follows intention. And it's creating awareness and shielding, because what happens is, as we were saying, people who are very sensitive, they end up shutting everything down. And I'll have people come to me and they've shut everything down, which shuts out using your gifts and perceiving spirit. And they don't know how to open back up. So if they can learn methods like you're teaching to protect themselves where they can still interact with the world. One that I love that I use is when people are coming at you, and empaths especially, but anybody, we absorb other people's energy. They're projecting it on us. They're throwing it at us. They're coming at us. And I used to hold up a mirror, but now I have this glass house, and I just get in the glass house so I can still see out and you can still interact with me. But whatever you throw at me just goes back to you. Same with the mirror. And it's fascinating because people who don't really understand or believe in energy, but it works. The other person will stop throwing it because it goes back on them and they don't know what's happening. But all of a sudden they're thinking, ooh, this feels really bad. I don't like this. So I would say learn things like you and I are talking about, where you protect your energy. It's all energy management. I used to get really sick until I understood how to manage my energy, because I was wide open walking around all the time. And your empath can be a superpower. I talk about this a lot, and this is my own journey. It can be a superpower once you learn your own energy management. But if you shut it all down, you can't use any of it.
That's beautiful. I love everything you said. And I want to just say to our listeners or our viewers that it's very important that you understand that Michelle is talking about these really profound things very simply. And we tend to confuse simple and easy. And we'll say, oh, that's too easy. Like Michelle says, energy follows intention. Well, that's kind of everything, like right there, everything. But you have to believe that or it won't work for you, because if you don't believe it, then it isn't in your field. And if it isn't in your field, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get those results. And then also, you have to understand that just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy, because we tend to get in our own way about it, right? That happens a lot, that we'll get in our own way. So, Michelle, I feel like you're going to make introverts everywhere feel better, because a lot of times that's how, being an empath shows up is in being an introvert, because you can't take in a lot of the senses that are the sensory input that's coming from the world, right? So what is it that you would love to leave people with? What is it, one more thing that we used to say this in one of the groups that I was in, like, what's one more thing? So what's one more thing that you'd like to share with people or let them know about?
I love the way that you talked about it, with using your conscious mind and then using your gifts, and that allowing and receiving part of it. And so everybody can be aware of your gifts, aware that you have senses to perceive that can come through in ways that can be used for healing and for intuition. And so really exploring that and developing that and recognizing, finding that balance more, because once you used to learn to use your intuition, even in the everyday world, it just makes your life happen with so much more grace and ease.
Perfect. And where can people go to learn more about you, and sometime in the very near future to learn more about the Barr Institute of Mediumship?
People can find me on Facebook. They can find me at michellebarr.com and michellebarrmedium.com. And I've got all the information on there. I show up on Facebook every day. I've built a big community of healers, intuitives, and mediums. So I would love to connect.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. You've been so wonderful. And I loved everything that you shared. And I think this is going to be a huge help to people. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Blessings, everybody. We're really happy to have had Michelle with us and to get to learn all this cool stuff. I learned new stuff today, so I hope that you did as well. Love to get your comments, your feedback, if this episode spoke to you, and I will see you for the next episode. Blessings.
You have just listened to another enlightening and transforming episode of Your Goddess Awakened with Hallie Evelyn. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and join us again next time so you can continue your journey towards a full transformation. For additional resources and to learn more about working with Hallie Evelyn, visit HallieEvelyn.com. Receive more, do less, and love your life. Only here on Your Goddess Awakened.